All right, guys. This is a video of the study guide answers to kind of help you check yourself and also to help you study. And this way you can rework the problems if you need to at home tonight before your test. And also, if you have any questions, you can ask before we take the test tomorrow. And just to re-instruct you on how to solve these problems. There's a lot of rules you have to follow and a lot of things to remember. So with that, I hope this video helps you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is our study guide for topic 6. You should have it with you, so get it out and follow along if you would like. So let's look here with question 1. Let's see if I can get my... All right, so question 1 says, which equations are true when 6/10 is placed in the blank space? Also, side note, I might have to do part 2. I'm not sure if I can get this done in 15 minutes, but if I can, good for me. So anyway, which equations are true when 6/10 is placed on the blank? Circle all the correct answers. So I would go ahead, this is important, I would go ahead and write 6/10 in each blank so I don't forget. And what you're going to do is you're going to have to solve all of these to see if they're correct. Okay, I would start with the easy ones if I were you, or you can just work your way down the row, but I would start with the ones that already have the divisor and the dividend, or the dividend and the divisor, but you know, whatever you prefer to do. But I'm going to start with A, just for time's sake. So I've got 2.4 divided by 6/10. If it comes first in our equation, that means it's in the house, it's in the den. And 0.6 is our divisor. Now what I do to the divisor, I must do inside the house. So I'm going to move this decimal one time to give me a whole number. I'm going to move this decimal one time to give me a whole number. Now I have basically 24 divided by 6. And if I know my 6's, then I can write them down. If I don't, I can use partial products. I know 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. And say that's all I know. So I see that 18 is close to 24. So I'm going to use a partial product of 3. And I'm going to say that it's 18 because we're multiplying 6 times 3. I subtract. I can't take 8 from 4, but I can regroup and make that 14 and make this to a 1. 14 minus 8 is 6. Yeah, 6. And then I'm left with none left over. 1 minus 1 is 0. So what times 6 gives me 6? 1 does. I have 6, I subtract, I have a remainder of 0. So when I add these two things together, 3 and 1, that gives me an answer of 4. But because I did move my decimal in the divisor and I moved it in the house, my decimal stays where it is, right there. So I have a whole number of 4. Is that the same as 40? It's not, so it can't be A. Let's look at B. 18 is in the house because it comes first, and I'm dividing by 6/10. What I do to the divisor, I have to do to the house, so I'm moving it one place. I don't have a decimal here, but I know there's an understood one there. So I'm going to move it one place and I have a hole. Whenever I have a hole, I fill it with a 0. So now I have to do 6 however many times to get close to 180. And I'll use partial products to help. So I know that 6 times 1 is 6. I know 6 times 1, then I know 6 times 10 is 60. 6 times 2 is 12. And if I know 6 times 2, I know 6 times 20 is 120. Well, that looks pretty close. So I'm going to use that. So I'm going to say 6 times 20 is 120. I'm going to subtract 0. 8 minus 2 is 6. 1 minus 1 is nothing. Now I've got to go and see how many times 6 can go into 60. Well, I've already written that. 6 times 10 is 60. So 10 is my partial product. I get 60, I subtract, and I get 0. So I'm going to add these two things together. 20 plus 10 is 30. So is this one true? Yes, it is. Okay, let's look at C. This time, 6/10 is our dividend, and I'm dividing by 1.2. What I do to the divisor, I must do in the house. But here's a problem. I have 12 and I have 6. I know 12 can't go into 6, so I'm going to have to move this decimal one extra time. And this extra move, I'm going to have to put back. So I fill it with a 0. I know 12 can go into 60. And if I know my 12s, 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 4 is 48. So say that's all I know. So I'm going to use partial quotients. I see 48 gets me close to 60 without going over, so 12 times 4 is 48. I subtract. I can't take 8 from 0, but I can make it a 10 and make this a 5. 10 minus 8 is 2. 5 minus 4 is 1, so I'm left with 12. What times 12 gives me 12? 1 does. Subtract 12 from 12, and I get a remainder of 0, which is what I want. I add these two things together, and I get 5. So right now my decimal is right here, but that extra move that I made, I have to put it back because I didn't do 2 moves out on the divisor. I only did 1. So that means I can only move it once inside. But if I need to go an extra space, I'm going to have to put that decimal back. So my answer is 5/10. So C is not correct. Let's look at D. 48 divided by 80. Okay, so I don't have to move anything on my divisor, but I have to move something here because 80 can't go into 48. But if I know that there's an understood decimal, I move it one place and I fill it with a 0. This is going to have to be taken back with my quotient, so I'm going to have to put it back. But for right now, I'm going to look at it as 480. And so if I write out and do partial quotients, 80 times 1 is 80. 80 times 2, this should be easy. 8 times 2 is 16, but all I do is place that 0, so it's 160. 80 times 3, 8 times 3 is 24, so all I do is place the 0, so it's 240. And say that's all I know. So I'll say 3 and 80 times 3, and that gives me 240. When I subtract, I get 240. Here I know this again, so I know 80 times 3 is 240. I subtract and get a remainder of 0. Then I add these partial quotients together, 3 and 3, and I get 6. Now, my decimal's here right now because I moved it. But because I didn't move it on the divisor, I have to move it back to where it was. So 0.6 or 6/10 is my answer. Does this match? It does, so D is an answer. So I'm running short of room, so I'm going to try to fit some of this in. I might have to erase some. I can already tell I might have a part 2 to this video, so stay tuned. So the last one, part E, is 0.6 in the house, or 6/10, divided by 4 gives me 15 hundredths. So let's see if they're correct. Well, I know I don't have to do anything to the 4 because it's a whole number, but I do have to move this decimal in here. If I move it once, I get 6. But 4 can't equally go into 6, so I'm going to move it a second time to make it 60. These 2 moves that I made, I'm going to have to move it back to where it came from. So, with that, I'm going to write out my 4s. So, excuse me. So, 4 times 1 is 4. If I know 4 times 1, then 4 times 10, that's 40. 4 times 2 is 8. Oh, excuse me. 20 would be 80, but 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. And 4 times 30 would be too big. And 80 is too big, so I can stop here. So 4 times 10. I'm going to use 10 as a partial product, and I'm going to subtract 40 from 60. I get 20. Now, what times 4 gives me 20? 5 does. So I know 4 times 5 is 20. I subtract and I get 0. I'm going to add these 2 partial quotients together, and I get 15. Now my decimal's here right now, but because I made 2 moves inside and I didn't do anything to the divisor, I got to put the decimal back. So 1, 2. So my answer is 15 hundredths. Is this correct? It is. All right. So let's see if we can get through with number 2 really quick. It says Gabriel has a stack of nickels that is 72/100ths of an inch tall. The thickness of the nickel is 8/100ths of an inch. How many nickels does Gabriel have? Okay, so I'm going to have to divide. So I'm going to say, okay, 72/100ths divided by 8/100ths. Well, I need it to be a whole number, so I'm going to move it 1, 2, and what I do to the divisor, I do inside. So 1, 2. Now I have a simple multiplication problem. What times 8 is 72? It is 9. But because I moved the decimal 2 places on both the divisor and the dividend, it gets to stay where it is. So I have 9 whole nickels. Okay? All right, let's look at the next one. I'm actually going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up with a new video for the last 3 problems, because this one's going to take me a minute, and I know I'll run out of time. So instead of doing that, I want you to focus on number 1 and number 2, and write down the correct answers and follow the process. And if you have any questions, write them down, bring them in class before the test tomorrow, and then I'll pick up with part 2 in just a minute.